Hey everyone, MeltingMan234 here, and welcome to another installment of Oz Month, where I get to cover some of the more obscure topics related to the Land of Oz. When it comes to film adaptations of The Wizard of Oz, everyone knows about the MGM classic. But before all of that, there were a few attempts to bring the Land of Oz to life in the silent film era. There was the fairy log and radio plays from 1908 that features adaptations of the Oz books, but that stuff has become lost to time. In terms of surviving adaptations, there were a few films from the 1910s, mostly made by the Oz Film Manufacturing Company, founded by the Oz author himself, L. Frank Baum. But in today's episode, we're going to be looking at a rather odd adaptation from 1925, simply called The Wizard of Oz. Now, this film was kind of special because in April of 2025, this film officially turned 100 years old. So, it's time to see if this film adaptation is a hidden gem, or if it's something that should have stayed in the past. The film opens up with a toy maker making dolls of the famous Oz characters. His niece then shows up wanting him to tell her the story of the Wizard of Oz, and he does so. It starts off about the Princess of Oz going missing for years. Sounds like we're getting into the book sequel here. Anyway, the people of Oz are ruled over by the evil dictator named Prime Minister Cruel, with his assistants being Lady Vicious and Ambassador Wicked. And if you thought those names were stupid, we also have Prince Kind, who rallies with the Oz people, demanding the return of their rightful ruler. After getting some advice from his assistants, he calls upon the wizard to distract them with tricks. So yeah, the wizard doesn't rule Oz in this version. They still portray him as a phony wizard who can't do real magic, but here he's just a meager yes-man to Cruel. After a long scene of the wizard summoning some random person in a fancy outfit, the girl speaks out for the audience watching this, saying that the film sucks and that they want to see the characters we all came to see. So now we have our Kansas setting, with Dorothy, her loving Aunt Em, her bossy Uncle Henry, and some farmhands. There seems to be like a handful of them, but there's only 3 that get the main focus. One of them just so happens to be played by Oliver Hardy in one of his early film roles before he became famous for the Laurel and Hardy duo. And since this character doesn't have a name, I'll just refer to him as Oliver. Then we have this guy, played by the filmmaker Larry Seaman, which I'll just call his character Larry. You think he's just one of those minor characters, but you might be surprised that this guy is actually the main character for some reason. Oh yeah, and then there's Snowball. He's the lazy, cowardly one, because he's black! Yeah, this is definitely an aspect of the film that has not aged well over the years. I mean, hell, his introduction shows him chomping down on a watermelon. A racial stereotype that was very common back in those days, but nowadays it's more offensive than anything. Anyway, we spend quite a lot of time on the farm, with Larry getting into all kinds of slapstick hijinks, from being booted into a cactus field to establishing a love triangle going on with Dorothy and Oliver, and being chased around by bees, with Uncle Henry also getting involved. Man, it's amazing how this film just stops to show off a bunch of slapstick moments. It feels like these scenes at the farm could have been its own standalone short film. Eventually, the film remembers that they're supposed to tell a story, and we get some backstory, where Dorothy was left on the doorstep to Aunt Em and Uncle Henry when she was a baby, along with an envelope that only she can open on her 18th birthday. Back in Oz, Cruel grows uneasy with the people revolting, so he sends out Ambassador Wicked to either destroy the envelope or destroy Dorothy. And he heads out to Kansas via biplane. Man, for a magical land of Oz, there's not that much magic going on there, especially when they're using that kind of technology. Anyway, Dorothy is now officially 18 and is ready to open the envelope. But then Wicked and his goons show up to retrieve it. Uncle Henry, who seems to have mellowed out, protects Dorothy by refusing to hand over the envelope. And we get some more love triangle stuff going on where it seems like Dorothy favors Larry now. Yeah, I guess Oliver just wasn't her type or something. But Oliver is determined to have Dorothy after Wicked bribes him with money and promises that he will be able to marry her if he can find the envelope for him. Uncle Henry digs up the envelope, Wicked tries to kill Dorothy by making her fall to her doom, while Oliver and Larry have a pretty impressive chase scene over the envelope. But when it looks like Wicked is about to finish the job, a storm blows in and scares them away. And I guess Aunt Em as well, since we never see her again. Anyway, we're over 30 minutes into the film, and finally we get the whole tornado scene, where Dorothy and the farmhands hide in a shed for shelter, only for the shed to be whisked away. Oh yeah, and Snowball gets caught up in the storm while being chased by lightning. They crash down to the ground, and you'd think they'd be dead at this point, but somehow they survived, and now they're in the Land of Oz. You'd think now we would get some more familiar settings from the book, but nope. Cruel wants to prevent the party from entering, but it's too late. The envelope reveals that Dorothy is the rightful ruler of Oz. Even so, Cruel still wants the others gone, so he orders the wizard to do away with them. Of course, the wizard has no magic, and after some hijinks, Larry and Oliver disguise themselves as a scarecrow and a man made out of tin, and go along with the wizard to make Cruel believe that he can still do real magic. Yeah, so this is supposed to be our Scarecrow and Tin Man of the film. In fact, how did Oliver even know about going along with the wizard's plan? With Larry it makes sense because they were very close to each other, but Oliver was far away from them. Still, it's quite the coincidence that the MGM version would do something similar in their Oz adaptation, where they had some of the actors play both the farmhands and the famous Oz characters. Of course, that idea was done better, while here it's rather pointless, as they're quickly found out in helping the wizard and are taken away to be sent to the dungeon. Oliver, being quick to throw anyone under the bus, claims that it was all Larry's fault for keeping Dorothy away from Oz. So Larry and Snowball are sent to the dungeons. Cruel plans on marrying Dorothy to maintain power over Oz, and Oliver is now dubbed as the Knight of the Garter. Oh yeah, and Uncle Henry becomes the Prince of Wales. Get it? Because he's fat! Anyway, the wizard decides to help the prisoners from being tortured by the executioners by having Snowball dress up in a lion costume to scare them away. So yeah, he's supposed to be the Cowardly Lion, though at this point they'll probably have already forgotten that this is supposed to be a Wizard of Oz film. Larry tries to escape, only to be chased by Oliver and the guards, which leads into a lot of wacky shenanigans with some crates. This is probably my favorite part of the film, mostly because it just defies all logic, with Larry suddenly teleporting into other crates to avoid being caught. But he soon finds himself in a worse scenario, where he locks himself up in the lion's den. Fortunately, Snowball is with him, still in the lion costume, and I guess he does that to confuse the other lions into thinking that he's already caught or something. Well, until he gets scared off by a real lion. And we also get this racist remark. Yuck, even the lion thinks that was awful. Then we get that whole gag where Larry thinks that the real lion is Snowball, only to later find out that it's the real deal, and they all hightail it out of there. Meanwhile, Cruel tries to force Dorothy's hand in marriage, only to be found by Prince Kind, and they have an epic sword battle. Well, until Larry shows up to save the day, cause, you know, he's the main character and all. A defeated Cruel reveals that he was the one who left Dorothy in Kansas all those years ago, because some hostile fraction meant her harm? I thought he just got rid of her to take the throne for himself. Then again, if that's the case, then why the hell did he leave her with an envelope revealing her real identity? Well, I guess it doesn't matter, cause we never find out who this hostile fraction is, and Cruel is quickly taken away. And despite saving the day, Larry actually doesn't get the girl, as Dorothy loves Prince Kind now. I guess she just really fancies a man with a mustache. But the film's not over yet, as Oliver and the rest of Cruel's party try to capture Larry. And after some chasing around, he's rescued by the wizard and Snowball, piloting a biplane. Well, until the ladder that Larry was hanging onto snaps and he falls to his doom, only to cut back to the toy room where I guess the girl got bored from the story and fell asleep. She then takes the dolls away, probably as punishment for her uncle for telling her a rubbish story, and then at the last minute, they say that Dorothy and the prince lived happily ever after. Yeah, despite the fact that the main character died. What kind of an ending was that? And that concludes the 1925 adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. Needless to say, it's not that great. Probably one of the worst adaptations of the story. Now, of course, films take creative liberties with the source material, even back in the silent film era. One example is the 1910 Oz film, where Dorothy meets the Scarecrow while she's still in Kansas. But this film goes too far into the other extreme that it's hard to classify it as an Oz film if it wasn't for the title. If the film had a different name, then maybe it would have been okay, but the fact that the name The Wizard of Oz shows up as the film's title, and in the film itself, really feels tacked on, as they barely incorporated any elements from the story. Just a lot of chase scenes, a lot of slapstick, and some scenes that would be considered racially offensive nowadays. And Dorothy's not even the main character in this film. She's just the MacGuffin, all while Larry Seamon is hogging up all the screen time. I'm sure he's fine in other films that he's been involved in, but this one didn't do him any favors. In fact, this is considered as the film that ruined his life, and he later died 3 years after the film's release. But I will say, there are some scenes that are impressive, like all the chase scenes. This was way before CGI and green screen were a thing, so it's always fascinating how the actors basically put themselves in danger to get scenes filmed, or find other ways to work around it. There are some funny gags here and there, though admittedly, some of them really feel like they go on for too long, like the scene in the lion's den. I guess it's worth checking out if you just want to look back at history, though I think Buster Keaton films are a better example of the silent film era. Or it's worth checking out if you want to see some of the earlier works of Oliver Hardy before the Laurel and Hardy duo. Despite the film being 100 years old, the 1925 film adaptation is not that hard to find. It's one of those films that slip into the public domain, so you can easily find it anywhere. From various home media releases, to streaming services, to finding the entire film on the Wikipedia page, or just look it up on YouTube for free. Of course, there are varying qualities. Some of them have different soundtracks playing, or no music playing. Some still maintain the original look with the color-tinted scenes. Some are entirely in black and white, and apparently there's also a colorized version. So yeah, plenty of options to choose from if you decide to watch it. Otherwise, I just skip it. Well, that concludes this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.